My neighbor did 2 combat tours. Last month, I watched him load his truck for a 3-day trip, no tactical branding, no YouTube kit, a gray medical supply box, a surplus wool blanket, a headlamp running AA batteries. I asked what he spent total. He said somewhere around $200. I've been prepping for 11 years. I had $12,000 in gear sitting in that garage. Some of it I've never actually needed to use under real pressure. He was ready with $200. That gap stayed with me. It should stay with you too. I've been prepping since 2012. In that time, I've stress-tested gear through a 9-day winter power outage, a flash flood that cut off road access to my property for 4 days, and a regional water contamination event that lasted 3 weeks. I've run inventory audits on my kit after every one of those events. What I found, consistently, is that the items that held were not the items I paid the most for. What failed almost always came from the survival aisle. That pattern took me years to name clearly. This list is what I found on the other side of naming it. This isn't a shopping list. I'm not affiliated with any of these brands. There's no kit to buy, no course attached, no membership tier. This is a breakdown of 13 items that belong in any serious preparedness setup sourced the way veterans and long-term preppers actually source them, not the way the survival market wants you to. Every item on this list is available today, without special access. The difference between these items and their retail imitations isn't marginal. In some cases, it's the difference between something that works and something that only looks like it does. Item 1 Cat Tourniquet. The Combat Application Tourniquet, Generation 7. Standard military issue since 2005. $32 from North American Rescue Direct. It has 1 moving part. It operates one-handed. I've drilled one-handed self-application on my left arm until I can do it under 30 seconds in the dark. In 2019, I had a chainsaw accident during a tree clearing, not catastrophic, but enough to need my trauma kit. The retail survival kit tourniquet I had on the shelf failed to generate sufficient compression. It physically could not produce the arterial pressure the situation required. The cat in my dedicated trauma bag worked on the first attempt. That's not a brand loyalty story. That's a mechanical reality. The retail versions bundled into emergency kits are often engineered to a price point, not a pressure threshold. The cat costs $32. Its imitation typically costs more and fails when compression matters. This is the only tourniquet on the list. Item 2. Povidone Iodine. Generic Povidone Iodine Solution. Pharmacy shelf. $4. Broad-spectrum antiseptic wound irrigation. Military medics have used this in field conditions since the 1960s conflict zones. Disaster response. Forward operating environments with no surgical support. It works. The survival brand version is the same active ingredient at a lower concentration for $22. Same molecule, lower dose, 5 times the cost. The markup is paying for the packaging and the label, not the chemistry. I keep 3 bottles in my medical kit. I've used it twice for real wound care, once on a deep laceration during flood cleanup work, once on an infected blister that opened during a week-long bug-out drill. Both times it did exactly what it was supposed to do. There is no improved version of this product. There is only a more expensive label on the existing one. Item 3. Fixed blade knife. A fixed blade knife under 4 inches with a full tang. Not a folding knife, not a multi-tool. The full tang means the steel runs uninterrupted from the blade tip through the entire length of the handle. 1 piece of metal. No joints, no pivot, no mechanical failure point. Folding knives fail at the pivot. I've broken 2 of them in field use, both under lateral stress during shelter building work. Multi-tools distribute force across components that bend or seize under sustained use in cold weather, where metal contracts and tolerances tighten. My current fixed blade has been in use for 8 years. Fire prep, medical kit access, food processing, cordage work, structural cuts during a debris shelter build. It has not failed. It requires sharpening and basic care. That's the full maintenance requirement. One piece of steel, correctly chosen, outlasts 3 multi-tools. Item 4 Military Surplus Wool Blanket. 80% wool content or higher. Military surplus. $12 to $18. Not a Mylar emergency blanket, not fleece, wool. The specific case against Mylar for anything beyond immediate short-term exposure. Mylar reflects radiant heat, but it does nothing about conductive heat loss. When you're lying on cold ground and in an actual scenario, the ground is pulling heat out of your back through direct contact. Mylar does not interrupt that transfer. Wool does. Wool also insulates when wet. It doesn't crinkle at night and announce your position. It doesn't tear on the first snag. I've slept under a surplus wool blanket in sustained rain at 30 degrees during a 3-day grid-down drill. It performed. A $40 branded survival blanket stayed dry in my pack because I knew better than to bet on it. Wool doesn't photograph as well. It works better. That trade is always worth making. Item 5 Headlamp on AA Alkaline. A headlamp running AA alkaline batteries. Not rechargeable, lithium-ion. The failure mode for lithium in cold is specific. Below -10 Celsius, lithium cells lose 30 to 40% of capacity. The battery display reads full. Then it reads dead. There is no warning curve. Alkaline cells degrade linearly. You see the dimming. You have time to plan. More importantly, AA alkaline batteries are everywhere. Every gas station, every hardware store, every neighbor's kitchen drawer, every emergency cache built by someone who thought the problem through. During my 9-day winter outage, I ran through 4 sets of AA batteries across 3 headlamps. I sourced 2 of those sets from neighbors. That transaction would have been impossible with a proprietary lithium cell format. The best battery in an emergency is the one that exists within your sourcing radius. For most people in most scenarios, that's a AA alkaline cell. Item 6. Cloth-backed rubber adhesive tape. Cloth-backed rubber adhesive tape, not the thin plastic-backed tape from a hardware store display. The performance difference is temperature behavior. Plastic-backed tape becomes brittle below freezing and loses adhesion in sustained heat. In real field conditions, those are exactly the temperatures you're working in. Cloth-backed rubber adhesive tape, originally developed for military equipment packaging, maintains bond from -20 to 70 Celsius. I've used it to seal a cracked water container in below freezing temperatures, reinforce a tarp shelter during sustained high wind, and improvise a splint wrap over clothing when rigid materials weren't available. The plastic-backed version would have failed in 2 of those 3 situations. It costs slightly more per roll. Nobody markets it as survival gear because the story isn't dramatic enough to run an ad campaign on. It's tape. It holds when other tape doesn't. That's the entire story. Item 7 Aquatabs. Aquatabs. Sodium dichloroisocyanurate, NADCC at the WHO standard emergency dosage. Farm supply stores, $3.40 for 50 tablets. Each tablet treats 1 liter. 3 cents per liter of safe drinking water. The survival brand equivalent is the same molecule at the same dosage in branded foil packaging, $11 for 20 tablets. UNICEF distributes Aquatabs in disaster relief operations across 40 countries. That's the field credential. There is no more rigorous real-world validation available. I keep 200 tablets in my water kit. Total cost, $14. During my 3-week water contamination event, those tablets were in daily rotation, used as a redundant backup to my filter in case the filter was lost or compromised. For $14, a 3-year shelf life, and a sourcing channel that exists in every farming region on Earth. The branded version, with the compass graphic, does not perform differently. It just costs more. Item 8 Hemostat Clamp. A hemostat clamp. Basic locking forceps. Veterinary supply, $6 to $9. Weighs 12 grams. This is on the list because a tourniquet only works on a limb. Neck wounds, groin wounds, axillary wounds, These are locations where you cannot generate compressive pressure with fingers alone, where anatomy makes manual occlusion unreliable, and where arterial bleeding can be fatal in under 3 minutes. A hemostat gives you mechanical grip on a vessel your hand physically cannot hold. Every combat medic trauma kit contains one. The civilian survival market doesn't carry them widely because explaining the use case requires clinical directness that doesn't translate well into consumer packaging. The need doesn't disappear because the store doesn't stock it. $6 to $9, veterinary supply, 12 grams. It goes in the trauma kit. Item 9, NOAA Weather Radio. A hand crank or solar NOAA weather radio with battery backup. Specifically one receiving the 162 MHz NOAA weather radio all hazards frequencies, not just AM and FM. In a grid-down scenario, commercial broadcast infrastructure fails fast. FM stations lose power in the first wave. AM stations lose staff. NOAA weather transmitters are federally hardened infrastructure, built to broadcast through regional emergencies, running on government backup systems. When nothing else is transmitting, NOAA is still transmitting. The Midland ER, 310 runs on 3 AA batteries, a hand crank, or an onboard solar panel, $35. During the 4-day road access cutoff after a flash flood, my commercial radio went silent in hour 6. The NOAA signal ran continuously for the full 4 days weather updates, road closure information, resource distribution schedules. That was the only information channel I had for most of that event. $35 buys you the channel that stays open when everything else closes. Item 10 Sawyer Squeeze Filter. A Sawyer Squeeze filter paired with a 2-liter collapsible bottle purchased as separate components, not as a bundled kit. The Sawyer Squeeze filters 100,000 gallons before requiring replacement. Not 100, not 1,000. 100,000, it costs $22. I've had mine for 6 years. Municipal tap water, creek water, standing pond water, all of it. Backflush twice in 6 years. It has not failed once. Bundled survival kit versions typically contain a lower capacity filter element with a proprietary bottle that fails at the seam under moderate use. I've watched that happen twice on group drills. The right components, sourced individually, cost less than the wrong kit and outlast it by a decade. One purchase, done correctly, ends the filtration problem for any realistic preparedness horizon. Item 11, Wool Balaclava. A wool blend balaclava, military surplus, full coverage from crown to collarbone with a face aperture. $8 to $14. NATO cold weather standard since the 1950s. The case for this over a gaiter and hat combination is physiological. 40% of heat loss in cold environments exits through the head and neck. A full balaclava with a proper neck seal closes that gap completely. A hat and separate gaiter leave an interface gap that in mild conditions is irrelevant and in sustained cold with wind is not. I learned this specifically on a multi-day winter drill. Fleece gaiter, knit cap, what I'd always run. Night 2, I was showing early-stage hypothermia symptoms despite adequate layering everywhere else. Night 3, I switched to a surplus balaclava. The difference was immediate. The retail outdoor version costs $45, carries lower wool content, and fits for aesthetics before function. Surplus. $8 to $14. It solves the problem the retail version only approximates. Item 12 Automatic Mechanical Watch. A self-winding mechanical watch. The movement winds itself from normal wrist motion. No battery, no charging cable, no firmware update, no subscription. Entry-level automatics, Seiko 5 Series, Orient Bambino, run between $60 and $120 and will function for decades with periodic servicing. In a sustained grid-down event, every battery-dependent timepiece eventually stops. GPS watches fail without satellite access or a charge. Phones die. Time coordination is an operational function. Watch rotations, medication schedules, solar navigation, meeting timing at a rally point, these depend on accurate time. A person who loses reliable time starts making compounded errors in judgment and sequencing. That degradation is gradual and hard to notice from inside it. I've worn a mechanical watch as my daily driver for 7 years. It has never needed a battery. It has never stopped working. It just runs. Item 13. Paper Topographic Maps. USGS 124. 000 scale topographic. Maps your home, county, and the 2 adjacent counties, stored in a waterproof sleeve, $8 to $12 each, through the USGS store or MyTopo. No battery. No software update. Cannot be remotely disabled. Will not lag, freeze, or require a signal. Terrain, elevation change, water sources, road and trail networks, and built structures, all of it readable at a single glance, at a resolution no digital interface matches without zooming. I've run paper map navigation drills twice a year for 8 years. Topo map and baseplate compass only. Every single time I find something, my GPS app missed a ridgeline that changes the route, a drainage that provides water, a road that doesn't appear in the digital layer. Navigation is not a backup skill. It is the primary skill. Your phone is the backup. 1 map per geographic zone. $10. No charging required. Works until the paper disintegrates. 13 items. None from the survival aisle. None tactical branded. Total cost for all 13. Purchase today through the right channels. Under $300. Sources are straightforward. North American Rescue for the Cat Direct. Aquatabs through FarmTech or Granger. Sawyer through REI or the manufacturer's site, not the bundled kit version. USGS store for topo maps. Midland Direct or any electronics retailer for the weather radio. Veterinary supply for the Hemostat. Surplus suppliers for the wool. I've been running versions of this kit for 11 years. I've used it in actual events with real outcomes attached, not drills, not controlled conditions. What's on this list is what was still functional when those events ended. Everything else is in the description. No affiliate links, no bundles, nothing to sell. Just the list and what I know it does.